If you haven't been 2 weeks ago, it's sort of, it can be like round two, but also exploring the topic of in short, overwhelm. But where it came from, it was a theme we dedicated a whole February. It was on giving, and we explored the area of giving. And my idea was to notice the conditions for giving, the conditions for positive emotion. So when we're in good space, giving is natural. Yeah, giving sort of comes naturally. You don't have to try. When I think Bhante said something, when your heart is filled with love and joy, then everything else arises. You sort of can't help it. And that's what we touched upon 2 weeks ago. But then my question is, what happens when we're not like that? Yeah, what happens when we're actually upset, angry, overwhelmed, bored, all other emotions? What do we do then? Knowing that we come here, we're Buddhists, or we're inspired by Buddhism, we sort of, sometimes we can sort of impose all those tools we have, impose the positive emotion and being a good Buddhist on all those emotions that are not yet in a place of open-hearted generosity. Yeah, so we've touched upon that, and I think just by looking at that, it brings a certain clarity on what it means to live in the 21st century, where we're surrounded by quite a lot of really difficult things happening. Yeah, I don't need to even say, you can watch news or recall probably what's happening in the world right now, and all of those emotions may arise. Yeah, including overwhelm, including like not feeling empowered enough. You name it, and it probably will be there within anxiety. It will happen within your body. So what we started with was sort of acknowledging that by just being here and just being sort of in our body, we're already opening up to, at least in principle, wanting to be of help and service. Yeah, just being curious, just sort of as a given, as humans, we really want to kind of take a part in a more kind of kinder way of living. Yeah, and when we hear about all difficulties, we sort of whether tend to quickly shut down or we want to help, and it's not always that easy. Yeah. And Vesantra, one of the teachers who wrote all the article about dealing with overwhelm, he said something about that level of care and level of wanting to reach out from the basis of your heart, and then suddenly having those little voices in our heads of oh, am I good enough? Oh, I can't do this. All those little secret voices are creeping in. And we start to feel less and less empowered. And he says it's because he mentions that our society suffers from a kind of deadly duo, he says. And he says it's one of those things is a low self-esteem in relation to ourselves. So in a way, we just doubt in ourselves. We may not think we're big enough, good enough, that we can do it, whatever this is. And because of the horrified anxiety in relation to what is happening in the world. Yeah, we're bombarded constantly by a lot of really terrifying news. And in a way, it's really difficult to connect with that. And it's much more sort of simple to switch off or to get really kind of overwhelmed around, all difficulties happening. So he suggested 20 different things of how to deal with all those responses, and they're quite practical. And we went through quite a few of them 2 weeks ago. So I will just give you a little recap because we have many other to kind of to attend to. So quite a few of them were relating to being mindful of social media and the right use of social media and what impact it has on us. Some of them were to do with staying grounded and resourced, and we had quite a lot of discussion around that, on how to stay grounded and how to look after yourself within your own kind of knowledge and capacity. We talked about the near enemies of compassion, that is pity and horrified anxiety, and how to deal with that. And we talked about irrational guilt and also how to deal with that. And we talked about holding in our heart the wish for suffering to come to an end. So instead of going outwards and kind of being tangled within the difficulty, we come back and see where our intention is. Yeah, see that very longing for the suffering to end. And from that, we went to looking what it means to be with that unbearable difficulty in you when something is sort of trembling and like you start to feel that overwhelm, and how to deal with that. And that point is where we stopped. And the point is called let your heart break. Yeah, let your heart break. It is quite a radical suggestion. It is quite a radical suggestion. And what Vesantra means is when feels start to really, really get difficult within ourselves, he says, despite how it feels, we should stay with it and stay with the feeling of that unbearable overwhelm. He says what happens is that there is an overwhelming sense of love and compassion, desperately longing for things to be better. And that's why we feel so overwhelmed. Yeah, it's our longing, our heart's longing is trying to make sense out of it. So he says, when you stay with it, life goes on. And all that has happened is that our heart has become more open and softer and more tender and responsive to what was before. So he says, be prepared to let your compassion, to let your heart open. Compassion will not really break your heart. Yeah. So we stay with it, we touch that unbearable, and we allow compassion to arise. It's quite something, isn't it? It's quite something to really sort of look within. He says, everything is impermanent. Even a great wave of sadness will always transform into the next experience of our life. Yeah, I see a few people nodding. It sort of rings the truth, doesn't it, from our own experience. Yeah. So in a way, those pointers are not anything extremely new, but it's so hidden in us and so sort of like protected by our heart and our responses that it's very difficult to come back to it. So partly that's why we're sort of exploring it again. Yeah. So we give it sort of light and openness. So we stopped here, and the next one. It sort of comes into this area, comes into kind of like a wisdom element of understanding heart and overwhelm. So the next point says, work in your sphere of influence. So first we allow ourselves to feel the full impact of whatever the situation we're facing. And we allow our heart's longing for that suffering to be relieved, as in the previous point. And then we come to the point of reflecting on how to respond. Yeah. So usually our initial response is we act. we see something is going on, and before we know it, we're fixing the situation. Yeah. So here the suggestion is, hold a second, pause and see what's happening for you. Because usually it's the most frightening thing is our response. We're really frightened on what is happening within us. Yeah. So his example is connected with motivation, and I found it quite interesting. He says we allow the difficult situation to deepen our motivation. Yeah. So his example is talking about war in the Middle East. Yeah. So he says maybe I can't do much about the war. Well, currently it's the war in Ukraine. Yeah. So I can't do much about Ukraine and the situation there. I'm here in the UK and it feels quite far. And suggestion is, once I let myself, feel that response and really be with that heart longing and the heart's wish, and really recognize that, my wish is for the suffering to end. The motivation may deepen in a way that a creative response may arise. Yeah. So, for example, talking about ethical precepts of here and now, talking about exploring kindness. Yeah. Teaching people metta. So sort of creating a culture here and now, a culture that is non-violent. This is the suggestion. Yeah. So it will be indirect way of tackling that suffering, but at the same time, all we can do is to act for here and now. In some ways, we think we are sort of disempowered because things happen far away, but actually we are able to do things right now within our sphere of influence. I wonder if there is any other example we could come up with in terms of dealing with this like long distance suffering. So some of it will be talking about loving kindness, but are there any other things you think that are useful to sort of bring up in terms of your own experience?
I was just thinking about when the war was developing in Ukraine, and feeling powerless. And I looked up, there was a chant, this chant that was a kind of anti-war, to promote peace. So I learned that chant every day walking to work and coming back, because it was quite, we were supporting people directly affected by the war. But just being able to chant that chant and work with that. It was just a small thing, but it was in my power. It was in my control. It was something positive and creating positive energy that felt like it was doing something to counteract the really negative energy that was obviously around the awfulness of what was happening.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a good way. Chanting is a really lovely way in terms of working on our minds and sort of feeling you have some power over the influence of your mind. It is actually one of the points is connected with chanting. One of the suggestions says work on the inner as well as the outer level. And one of the suggestions on that is that we can always do, maybe we can't do something outwardly, maybe it's not in our power, but we can always do something inwardly. Yeah. What could we do? So there is mantra. What other things are that actually we can as practitioners do inwardly as well, and that have an effect. You were nodding.
Yeah, for me, I've always struggled, I think, with the methodology of meditation, and but recently, one of the books I've been reading, as you say, when you allow your heart to break, I read the book Broken Open, and I think it's a lovely kind of metaphor that is for when you break, you let in the light, and it's not what you expect it to be, or what you fear it's going to be in your head. Your actual experience of it is literally bearable, and it isn't going to break you as you thought it would, and it will repair. It's not permanent, and it's not personal to you, and it's not pervasive, because even though part of you know you're broken, it's like, what isn't? And when I've allowed myself to go, okay, so right now I feel shit, but there's a part of me that still feels, oh yeah, I'm lying in my warm bed, and aren't I, if you like kind of gratitude, and then gradually, just kind of leaning into what is right, what is, and when you think about in the war in Ukraine, how much love and compassion is being generated and experienced, and how much togetherness is being generated by this, and when I start to kind of lean into that experience of, there are good people, some amazing people. I just find it so uplifting and very empowering, because you realise that you're not helpless. You're not helpless. There's an awful lot of compassion and love being generated in that kind of environment where we don't really expect it to. And I just kind of felt, wow, that's made such a difference to me, and now the better partner to kind of say, okay, so what I really love about me, and what I really love about that person who's close to me, and what I really love about that woman who's really confident, and that person who I felt some animosity to, it just kind of feels like the energy kind of spreads out into infinity. That energy does work, it's a shift. And just, if we practice that, just once or twice or 3 times a day, just for a few seconds, just for a few minutes, and then just let it go. And the impact, the compound impact that has is just so profound.
Thank you. It's lovely. It's lovely to sort of know and hear and talk about what happens sort of behind, the closed door in our worlds. I think it really has an effect. We certainly do, like those who are ordained here, you probably know, every Sunday morning, I think it was during the lockdown, we started practicing a practice called bodhicitta or tonglen. That's another heart practice. It's giving and receiving. And it sort of started off because of the pandemic and trying to sort of, again, help each other in the times when you were not able to physically kind of come together as a Sangha. And we still carry on, it still carries on every Sunday morning. And it's an absolutely beautiful practice where about 100 of older members join online, and you can feel that, you can really feel the effect of the practice towards, sending the loving kindness towards the whole humanity, really. So it's quite powerful way, the inward practice. What comes with it, another point, is entrust the situation to deeper forces. And I love it. because he says, everyday me can never fix the suffering in the universe. What a relief. What a relief that it's not all on me. And how often do we think it's all on me? I need to take that responsibility. Yeah. So we call upon the lineage of the practitioners, we call upon the qualities of the Buddha, we invite that which is beyond us to help us within this mundane world. Yeah, I think it's very connected with metta as well. Yeah, we call upon the heart opening. The next point is checking your expectations about life in the light of the Dharma. Yeah. So in a way, it's about our expectations and how we think that things should go in our life. Yeah. Anyone recognizes that? This should or should not have ever happened. Yeah. So we sort of bring that level of overwhelm or suffering to ourselves through, illness, for example, happens, and we're resisting it. Yeah. So we're sort of like never prepared for things to arise and pass away. He says the Dharma reminds us, all meeting ends in parting, all accumulation in dispersal, all life in death. Yeah. And it's not easy to take in. It's not a bright, sort of inspiring way of addressing the Dharma. However, it is a very fact of what happens. Yeah. So we come here, we learn the Dharma, and we open up to that knowledge in order to be able to take it in bit by bit, a little bit at the time. He says that also that even includes the current world order and the Triratna Buddhist community, yeah, and being a Buddhist, yeah. So everything will dissolve at some point. So it's quite over. I still can't really put it together in my head, in sense of like, so who am I really? Who am I? What is this identity about? Yeah. The next one is, do your best to let go of hopes and fears about outcomes. He says that because they take up a great deal of energy. Yeah, if we live, let's say we live here, right? But if our head is occupied by what is about to happen, and we stress out about the outcomes or about what happened, we're never sort of fully able to be content within our life. Yeah. So he stresses very much the area of hopes and fears, and maybe it's not because it's not easy to just say, oh, let go, and then okay, I'm not gonna live with fears and hopes. But actually, what he points out that it's sort of, you can keep coming back to what is happening right now and acknowledging what is happening here, which then may lead towards opening up to the present rather than being caught in the area of anxiety about the future and fears and hopes are to do with that. Yeah. The next point is, use the wishing prayer that dispels hope and fear. Does anyone know that wishing prayer that dispels hopes and fear? It's apparently in Tibetan tradition, where Tibetans recommend that we make that when we're full of hopes and fears about a situation will turn out, we make the wish that whatever is for the best, may it happen. Yeah. So it's quite of a simple one, and even for some things that the positives we want kind of to move towards, all we say in our heart is, may it happen, may whatever happen, that is best for me. Yeah, whatever is best for this situation, may it happen. I've tried it before, and it actually, I still got what I wanted. But it sort of started to, I could see the influence on my mind, that I was less grasping to that very thing. Yeah, I'm still glad I got it. But as I was sort of, I think it was Vesantra actually saying something, oh yeah, may this happen if it's best for us. And I couldn't sort of figure out why he's saying that. And I was thinking, doesn't he want this to happen, the retreat to happen? Doesn't he want to be part of this amazing event? You know, all he said, may this happen if it's for the best of us. And then it's sort of like, when I started to kind of look into it and like recognize what it really means, I realized how little I know about what's best for me. You know, like so many times we think we know that very thing will make me the happiest person forever and ever, and you got it, and then you realize that you're still unhappy, or you know, you still want something else. So in some ways, it's quite of an antidote to that greed and to the grasping. So you trust that through, you know, you trust the universe, you trust that life itself will bring whatever is best for you. Yeah. I will just give you two more examples, and then I think we will explore bits in smaller groups, so we can have a chance to kind of talk about the ideas. Yeah. One of the ideas is, probably some of you already does that. One of the ideas is use short pieces of Dharma to help anchor you. Are you familiar with that? Is anyone using little bits of verses or kind of mantras, or yeah? I have things written everywhere, like in my notebooks, in my book. I have them written everywhere, and it sort of starts to kind of work on my mind when I don't know what to do with myself. So you kind of find a little piece of Dharma when you sort of, you know, engage within the study or reading a book, and if there is something that grasps your attention and you think, oh, this is great, the suggestion is to take it with you and read it as a sort of mind-turning reflection again and again. So we sort of allow the Dharma influence our mind. Yeah. One of the example of the quote is from Shantideva, and it says, "If you can't do something about it, why worry? If you can't do anything about it, why worry?" I really like that. The sort of, yeah. The one we will take to our little groups is about, the suggestion is being part of a community and having spiritual friends is crucial. It says it's not only a good idea, but he says it's crucial. But he also says that we want, in a community, we want it to be a trouble shared is a trouble halved, not a trouble doubled. Yeah. So we don't enter conversations within the community for the sake of being sort of acknowledged and kind of expanding the difficulty, but we enter the conversations in order to gain some clarity and broader perspective. Yeah. So we choose people we talk to, rather than, we don't want to escalate the problem, but we want to, you know, keep up with our intention on becoming or creating a better world. Okay, I think that's enough for now. I will leave the last one for when we finish. But how about we find someone who we haven't spoken today, who we haven't spoken to today, maybe 2 or 3 people, and have a chat about how it is for us in our everyday life, the area of using the Dharma, and maybe the examples you've heard today, or maybe your own examples around dealing with anxiety and overwhelm. Okay?